Hello, everybody. Let's talk about sex.
Woo!
Right. Now that I can say the word, yeah. So I'm Chris Anderson. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am a certified sex therapist as well. So yeah, I have my own private practice where I work with. I do a lot of couples therapy and individual work with sexual issues and other issues as well. But yeah, I meet online virtually. But yeah, so I want a lot of interaction for this for the presentation. So I'll be asking questions. If any of you have any questions about anything I say, please ask. I very much welcome that. Because yeah, I don't want to say anything that doesn't make any sense. So by way of introduction, this is my fiancée Katie. We are together for about 2 years and getting married at the end of the year.
Wow.
Nice.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
So a little personal background. I grew up Mormon. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I don't know if anyone's here familiar with the Mormon Church at all. It's a very, very conservative Christian church. And spoiler alert, I'm not in the church anymore. But that is how I was raised. And the reason I bring this up is because it has a lot to do with what I was raised to believe about sexuality. It was basically a lot of rules about what not to do. Don't do this, don't do that, no heavy petting, no passionate kissing before you're married, all this stuff. Like, sexual sin is comparable, if not worse, than murder, like all this stuff. And then, when you're married, sex is good. That's the good part about it. That's how I was raised. I was married at one point, married a Mormon girl, and yeah, got divorced, and then so I did my undergrad in Abilene, Texas, Abilene Christian University, and my experience with grad school kind of challenged a lot of my beliefs, and eventually I felt less and less like I fit in, and then moved to Florida in 2015, and I left the religion and kind of started to find my own path. And part of that was exploring sexuality I don't want to say unrestricted, but not reckless abandon, but like they had some interesting experiences. Absolutely not. Yeah, I just started to explore that. So that was really liberating, and so yeah, the reason I bring that up is it helped me develop a passion for good sexual education. To kind of give people what I didn't have growing up, to kind of help people form very positive attitudes about sex, and to be able to explore anything and not make it about the rules and what not to do, but make it about what you can do and how it can be enjoyable. Then a few years ago, I got my certification in sex therapy at the American Academy of Clinical Sexology. But yeah, that's kind of my background. I've lived in Pennsylvania, lived in Utah, I've lived in Hungary for a couple of years.
Wow. That was a
Texas.
curveball.
Yeah.
I was doing missionary work for the Mormon Church. Nice. I was fully into it. And then Texas and Florida, so I've kind of lived around different places. But that's me, basically. Nice. All right, so let's do a little intro to sex. Woo. So this will not be a typical type of sex education. So when you think of sex education, sex ed, like in school, what do they teach you? Condoms.
Reproduction.
They teach you reproduction.
That's all they really
yeah.
teach you. Yeah, it's just all reproduction.
I like to compare it to driver's ed. If you were to go to driver's ed and all they teach you is how the internal combustion engine works. Okay, well, now that's interesting, but
right.
How do I drive?
Right.
They don't talk about how to have good sex. They don't talk about what feels good and
That was me agreeing. Sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought I was mixing up the money.
Clap.
Like, about the money.
Oh, no.
I was like, I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, so rather than focus on the nuts and bolts, which is important, it's good to know how reproduction works, sure. But yeah, there's just not I think there's a fear of talking about how to have sex because there's a fear of promoting it, I guess, and encouraging kids to have sex. They think that kids will take that and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna go have sex," and I don't know. It's weird, and it's. I have a lot of feelings about the current education system on sex, but anyway, this will be a little different. We'll try to promote healthy ideas and how to actually enjoy it, and we're not going to be going over the nuts and bolts of it. All right, so let's talk about some sex myths. Sex is hard to talk about. Now, yeah, I'm sure this is true for a lot of people, but the reason I count it as a myth is because it doesn't have to be. Society kind of makes it this taboo thing, and we're conditioned to think that that it's hard to talk about or that we shouldn't talk about. Because I'm curious, how many people here, with how many of you did your parents talk to you about sex? At all? Let's just start with at all. Not a single hand, not even at all. Okay, because one thing I'll hear a lot from people when I ask the same question, they'll be like, "Yeah, I never got the talk, right? Like, what is the talk?" As if one conversation could handle all of sexuality. You know, like that's not even a good. The talk isn't even a good approach, and that doesn't happen. So yeah, what does that say? That says we don't talk about it. Well, it's better if we just don't talk about it, and that's what we grow up with.
And it's weird because of how pervasive it is in movies,
Yeah.
show, media, everything.
Oh, we're
love
exposed
it.
to it all
Yeah.
over. Yeah, but
We
we
won't
don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And you know, granted, it is personal. I think one reason a lot of people have a difficult time talking about it is because it's very easy to take personally if somebody has any kind of critique or feedback about their sexual performance. It's very easy to be like, "Oh, I'm not a man, or I'm not a woman. Like I'm not good enough as a person." Like it can be taken really far, but we'll cover that. But it doesn't have to be hard to talk about. Another myth is if one or both people haven't not reached orgasm, we've failed at sex. Or people will say, "Yeah, we tried to have sex, but we didn't reach orgasm." Like, well, it sounds like you had sex, it just didn't reach orgasm. But yeah, we'll talk about what it means to fail or succeed at sex. Well, mostly about what it means to succeed. I'm not going to get into failure too much. If my partner's having difficulty getting aroused, it must mean I'm not doing it for them. It's a very common one, right? Something's wrong. What?
It's their hormones, probably.
Oh, well.
I agree.
The word hormones does appear in the presentation.
Oh, a spoiler.
Yeah, sorry. So, yeah, we'll get into many different reasons why that happens, but that's usually the people's first thing they jump to. There's something wrong with me. I'm not doing it for them. I'm not attracted to them. And yeah. Another one is it should be easy for men to get an erection, right? Like. It's weird. Our society has these competing things. On one hand, it's like supposedly easy for men to get an erection. Like you just look at it a certain way and then they're hard. Boom, that easy. And on the other hand, the erectile dysfunction industry is a huge, multi-billion-dollar industry. Like
There's a reason why it's multi-billion.
Yeah, but we don't talk about it. Men don't talk to each other typically about that kind of thing because it means they're less of a man. It doesn't. It's just we'll talk about that. This is a little sarcasm here, but virgin is a great word to describe somebody who hasn't had sex before. I try to get rid of the word. I don't like the word virgin, virginity. It's isn't it weird that we have a word for somebody who hasn't had sex before? We don't have a word for somebody who's never had ice cream before, or gone skydiving before, or, like.
That's so true.
And it could be a badge of honor, particularly for women. Women should be a virgin, and it could be a badge of shame that's not a thing. It could be a mark of shame for men, like, oh, you're a virgin, get made fun of. It's just this really weird thing. And then there's also the other vocabulary with it, losing your virginity being taken. Ugh. Like, weird. It's so weird. You don't lose anything. They don't take anything from you. It's just... Granted, having sex for the first time is a milestone. Sure, we can make that a big deal or an important milestone, but yeah, anyway, we won't be using the word virgin. virginity. We just talk about first time having sex. Yeah. All right, so about a little bit about what sex positivity is. Just kind of a hodgepodge of pictures here. It looks a lot of different ways. Whether it's gender, race, orientation, disability as well. Being sex positive is about recognizing that as long as it involves consent, and at the highest level, like consent between adults, like it's all good. If it's two consenting adults, it's all good. Now we get into minors, there's gray area there, and especially minors and adults with the law, and anyway, so I'm not getting into all that, but among adults in particular, it's all good as long as both people are consenting to it. And even with kids though, even though that's gray area, and do you want to promote your kids having sex, or do you want them to wait? Okay, we can talk about those things, but it's still about being positive about it. Sex is a good thing. It's okay that you want to do it. It's okay that you want to express these things, that you want to explore that. Like, that's all. It's okay. But yeah, I think it's about arming them with knowledge, educating them, and letting them make decisions and helping guide them with decisions. But yeah, anyway. But yay, sex positivity! Woo! Sex is great. All right, so another point I want to make is that when we say the word sex, sex does not equal intercourse or penetration. That is a part of sex. That is one thing you can do under the umbrella of sex, or under the menu of sex. We're going to talk about a sexual menu. Sex is sexual activity, very broad. So just want to make that clear. All right, what are some of the purposes of sex? Let's call out some answers.
Fun, intimacy.
Fun, yeah, intimacy, great.
Fellowship.
Reproduction.
Reproduction, yeah.
Pleasure.
Pleasure.
Bribery.
Braggery.
Bribery.
Oh, bribery.
Bribery.
Oh, wow. Coercion. Yeah.
Barter.
Barter. There we go, barter. I like it.
Yeah.
Barter get a lot.
I like it.
Hey, so we're sex positive, right? Yeah. Okay.
Hey.
Use
Use it if you got it.
Yeah, we got pleasure, fun, right? Connection, intimacy, right? Procreation, reproduction, stress relief, right? Exercise, explore curiosity. It'd be simple as that. And a lot more, like bribery.
I forgot one.
Yeah, you should forget.
What's that?
Making up from arguments.
Yeah,
There you
I
go.
think I thought of that. I didn't put it down. That's to repair.
Or breaking up.
Breakups.
Farewell.
Farewell.
It's a goodbye and hello to a new day.
Again, we're sex positive. I'll allow it.
The so-called FF, right?
Now, here's a question though.
Oh, God.
How many of these purposes, or which of these purposes require an orgasm?
None.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
procreation.
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 At least one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can make an
Stress
argument for
relief.
stress relief that the
Yeah.
orgasm is a big part of stress relief,
Right.
but it's not even the entirety of it, like hormonally. So yeah, only procreation is the only one. So it leads us to what determines a successful sexual experience. And I think it comes down to one question. Was it enjoyable for all involved? We can say both people, but trying to be even more, like, maybe it's more than two people, and that's okay. But was it enjoyable? That's what determines if sex is successful or not. I think we often put on this requirement of orgasm. Now, don't get me wrong. Oh yeah, so that's it. Orgasms are great. We love orgasms. They feel fantastic. They do help with stress relief and they help hormonally, all that stuff. Amazing. But they're not everything. They are great though. We're not getting rid of them. But I think one thing I like to help people do is just lower the bar and make it, if you both enjoyed it, then that was a successful sexual experience. If there was orgasm too, awesome, that's wonderful. But there are a lot of things that can come in the way. Part of my turn of phrase there, but there are a lot of things that can get in the way and prevent orgasm, but we don't have to let that make it an unsuccessful, a failure of a sexual experience. So basically what we're talking about is a journey versus destination mentality. Sex is the journey, it's the whole experience. Because when we make it about the orgasm, then what we're suggesting is that everything else before the orgasm is just a slog to get through, right? Like just work and then finally it pays off. No, it's all fun, it all feels great. Whether you're giving pleasure or receiving pleasure, it's fun. And that's, yeah, all right.
We believe you.
Thank you. Ugh. I'm getting worked up here. All right. So,
It is fun.
everyone could please take one or more. I borrowed a bunch of copies.
Wow.
But this is something that you can take home and you can fill it out by yourself. You can fill it out with a partner. However you want to do it. But basically, I like thinking of sex as a menu. Again, because it makes it that sex is not intercourse, that it's a lot of different things. Now, a note about these categories, these are not supposed to be restrictive. Meaning, if you put a sexual activity under starters, like, let's say, kissing, kissing can be done throughout the sexual experience, beginning, middle, or end. We're not trying to restrict these to any particular category. But this is just a fun way of looking at it. So when we think of starters or foreplay, and I say foreplay in quotes because sometimes foreplay can be, we'll get to that.
So I heard something one time that is really cool for good connected couples.
What's that?
Said that foreplay begins as soon as the last orgasm ends.
Oh,
I like that.
Nice.
Say it again.
Foreplay begins as soon as the last orgasm ends.
Yeah,
That is true.
there's
Yeah,
lots
so, I
that
mean,
goes, yeah.
It's if you're in healthy relationships can take all forms.
Yeah.
But if you're in a healthy relationship, the minute that you get there, you're kind of thinking about what's going to happen next and how you're going to get there. So, it depends on how you snuggle and kiss and talk and, relate.
Respect
and,
each other.
what the next phone call is like and all of the,
Yeah.
different things. And then, then it leads up and it ramps up and then you get to the next one and then you start all over again. Yeah.
I like that. Anybody familiar with the song "Business Time" by Flight of the Conchords?
It's business time.
Yeah.
Alright.
There's a lyric there
You
like,
don't know that song?
and then I take out the garbage. That's not part of foreplay, but it's very important. I argue that it is part of foreplay.
so
Like,
agree. I
if you're
agree.
taking that off their mind, off the table, like you've
Yeah.
just cleared up a little more space for intimacy.
And you'll probably know this, one of the biggest turn-ons for married women is when the husband helps clean up dinner.
Yeah.
Chores. Yeah.
It
They
helps
feel
do the
supported.
chores
They
after
feel,
dinner.
That's
yeah.
my love
Because
language.
it,
Yep.
it is, and I know at home for me, it's like, when we make dinner, it's fun to kind of, do the things afterwards because you feel connected, like you're sharing in the responsibility and you get to share in the reward afterwards. So,
Yeah. So, as far as starters, let's throw out some ideas for what are some different sexual activities we might consider starters. Just things that can get you kind of warmed up.
well, kissing now.
Yeah, I was just
Kissing,
gonna say
yeah, I
that.
said that one.
Yeah.
What else?
Cuddling.
Cuddling, love it.
Texting.
Texting, okay, yeah.
The right
Yeah,
emoji.
yeah.
Real
absolutely.
preemptive.
Okay, love
I
that.
like not indiscreet, just touching. And not
Yes.
necessarily touching on, just touching in places that aren't necessarily sexual, but touching in places that aren't common.
Yeah.
Aren't touched often.
Yeah.
There's a activity I like to teach people called I call sensual touch, where it's all about, it's like a massage, but it's less muscle focused and more about just exploring your partner's body. Maybe some massage oil, some Enya playing.
Even less than that, it's just touching in places that you don't normally get. Like, I mean, everybody shakes your hands, everybody touches your elbow, everybody touches your shoulder, but not everybody touches on your side or, you know, up kind of like at the small of your back or, you know, in the front of your chest, not necessarily.
Not the erogenous zones
Yeah.
specific, but yeah, everywhere else. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, we got, you guys named a bunch of these. Oral sex can be a starter. You're also going to see it, spoiler alert, you're going to see it appear on the main course list as well.
Spoiler.
So, I mean, for main course, yeah.
In case you didn't know.
Vaginal intercourse, anal intercourse, oral sex, manual stimulation, masturbation in front of each other, mutual mutual masturbation, and then dessert, using toys, snuggling, more oral sex.
Oh wow.
A favorite.
A favorite? Yeah.
It's in all three.
It's all three. I mean, there's no wrong place.
You should be omnipresent.
Well, okay, I say there's no wrong place, but it depends on the person, right? Sometimes, some people would be very sensitive, too sensitive to oral sex as a starter, and need a little more warm up. Okay. So that's why I say, like, it's not meant to be restrictive, but it can be really fun to have this list, come up with this list with your partner, and so then you can just kind of draw from it. So yeah, foreplay, not the stuff you got to get through to get to the good part. That's I know a lot of people who see it that way, and it's you're missing out. Like,
It's a bummer.
what?
It's a bummer.
It is. It can be so much more than that. And yeah, I mean, many people just need more time to warm up to be more to enter the full arousal state. And then, so maybe some of you already know this before, but only 15 to 20% of women, I've heard different percentages, but that's the one I've heard the most. 15 to 20% of women can reach orgasm through vaginal penetration alone. The reason I put that here is, I think it's interesting, but also, if intercourse were the main event, who's it the main event for, right? Like,
It's all about me.
right.
I'm being sarcastic. It's not. It's always about them.
Yeah.
It's always about, but you know, and I think, but even young ladies coming into the sexual experience, and especially young guys, it's all about, bam, the penetration, boom, boom, and
That's
the
sex.
harder I piston, the better it is, and you're like, nah, that's not the way it works.
Oh, you said piston. Okay.
Yeah.
It threw me for a little bit for
Well,
a second.
and you know,
Hey.
P-play is also okay. You know.
So,
And I think the problem we can run into if it's only focused on one person is if sex is rare, and then it's like, okay, I didn't get to reach orgasm. I don't know when I don't know when the focus is going to be on me. But if it's happening with some frequency, and you can trust that one of these times it will be focused on me as well, that's a completely different story.
so like, for example, so you're sexually active, it's a regular occurrence in the relationship, and tonight you come home and go, I'm interested in sex, and the other partner says, well, I'm not really, and you say, okay, well, help me out, and it's like, okay, you get yours, and you go, okay, I'm fine, let's go to sleep, I'm happy, but the next time it'll be the other way around. So it's just this give and take and finding out where people kind of mesh the best.
Exactly.
And it's okay to just say, hey, listen, I need something tonight. I know you're not into it, just help me tonight, and then you'll get yours when the time comes.
Yeah, actually,
That's an
next
idea.
slide.
Absolutely.
It's an
Next
idea.
slide.
Why
This
is
is-
everybody laughing?
That's true, but we don't talk about
Because
it.
your
So
bluntness
just
is
laugh.
refreshing.
He said
The
it.
next
No,
slide is about
that's
this.
the way it should be. Isn't
Yeah.
it?
Like,
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone say that out loud. So that
Yeah.
sounds funny to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It's like,
But that's why we're having this talk right
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
So yeah, the idea is more sexual experiences to fit more opportunities.
Yeah.
If sex is this whole rigmarole, involves all these steps, all these things every time, then it's very easy to get to like, oh, we don't have time, or I'm too tired to do that whole thing. But if sex can just be one of these things, a couple of these things, and different things, meeting different needs at different times, it's a lot easier to fit in something from the sexual menu. So now I'm talking about exactly what you were talking about just a moment ago. Sex drive versus sex interest. So sex drive is the urge to have sex, or the urge to seek satisfaction of sexual needs, horniness. That's sex drive. Because I get a lot of couples who come into me who say that their issue is a difference in sex drive. Difference in sex drive is, I don't know the percentage, but it's super common. Like everyone has a different sex drive, and so there's often going to be a difference in that, but that's not always exactly what the problem is. Sex drive is linked with testosterone, right? It's so, there is a general trend that sex drive might be higher in men than women, but there are many, many, many exceptions to that. Many, so it's not a rule. But yeah, okay, so that's sex drive. Sex interest is, are you open to connecting in this way? Or is it something your partner would like more of? So, what you were just talking about. My sex drive is really high, yours isn't. Okay, can we still connect in this way? Or on the other side of that, let's say your partner is the one who has a higher sex drive, and you, at this moment, you're not feeling horny, but you're open to it. So, consent is still king. We're not talking about like if you're sick or you're swamped with, we're not talking about just saying yes no matter what. Absolutely not what we're saying. But what we're saying is those times where I'm not feeling horny, but I'd love to connect with you and let's see how it goes. Let's warm up. Maybe we just focus on you this time, or maybe I end up getting into it and we make it, it's about both of us. But sex interest is where it can kind of fill that gap between the sex drives. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And yeah, so, what I was going to say, is this something your partner would like more of? We never want initiation to be primarily done by one person. Why is that? Why don't we want one person doing most or all the initiation?
Feels like it breeds like a resentment almost from the partner that's not the one constantly initiating.
It could, yeah, like all this stuff expected of me. What about for the person initiating?
It could wear you down. Like,
Well,
are you
yeah,
interested
yeah.
at all? I'm always pushing. I mean, like, well,
Yeah. What about your interest in me?
They're
Yeah,
gonna go find
you have
someone
no
that's
interest in
interested in
me?
them.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Mm.
The initiation, I try to tell people, like, it's got to be close to equal. And again, not tit for tat. We never want this ledger system of keeping it in perfect balance. That can go bad. But it should feel generally equal because both people want to feel desired. Both people want to feel interested in. So yeah, those times where sometimes it takes people with a lower sex drive to initiate when they're not horny, when they're not necessarily feeling down to clown, but but they want to. They know their partner would probably like to, and they want to connect with their partner in that way. And that's where something like sensual touch can be really good, because that feels good almost any time. You don't have to be in a particular place to enjoy that. Yeah. All right, so arousal issues. What is the most important sex organ?
Brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Brain.
Cheater.
Baboom. Yeah. So there are so many factors that can either hamper or help the arousal process. And just kind of going through this kind of quickly, hormones, right? Hormones can definitely be a huge factor in that. And that's why you go to somewhere like the Florida Center for Hormones and Wellness
Yes.
and get that looked at.
Hey.
Anxiety, huge one, right? And that could be about sexual performance or something completely unrelated. Like urgent tasks. It can just be, anxiety is such an enemy to arousal, I think.
I think the unrelated anxiety, I mean, just as getting into my upper 50s, I think that's one of the biggest things. Unrelated anxiety has nothing to do with sexual performance anxieties. It's more of you're anxious about this, that, the other, and so many things come up, and that's like a critical thing to when you're married for a while, you have kids, and now you have grandkids, and just the life issues going on you're anxious about.
Yeah.
It just makes a huge difference.
Mindfulness. So it's mindfulness, being able to be in the moment and be, when no matter what the situation of sexuality is, whether it's with your partner, or whether it's with an alternative situation or whatever, the mindfulness is probably the most important element to it. And I see it every day in this office, and when I sense the mindfulness not there, because I'll try to point it out to people. So you got to figure out how to get present, and just for a minute. Just for a minute, it's all going to be there later. Just for a minute, you got to figure out how to get everything out of your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, because usually you're in if you're with your partner, it's like, listen, you're with your partner. There's nobody better to be with for the moment.
Yeah.
She said, at the moment that you're with the partner, just let it all go, because it'll all be there. But you got to have that anchor. You got to have that one place. And it's funny. I mean, and I know you guys are really close, and when I see the really close connected people in the office, you'll see, you can tell the close connected people have good intimacy, and they're happier. They didn't have the worst problems in the world, but if you're connected intimately with your partner, for a few minutes you can put it all away and just kind of get regrounded.
And that's a big thing, and you reconnect with that, and you're right, everything else goes away.
Yeah.
And you're in that moment, whether it lasts 30 seconds, I'm being said, or 30 hours.
It doesn't matter.
It just makes a big...
It doesn't matter.
Strive for maybe.
When I was in college.
It doesn't matter. Even
That's what everyone wants.
and especially the older you get, the timing of it isn't as important anymore.
Right.
It's just the connection that's.
It is. It's
Very true.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We know what you're doing.
I ain't here for a long time.
No, I'm getting a delivery is what's going on.
And I found that yoga is what really helped me learn mindfulness. Everybody here done yoga before?
I'm a teacher.
Oh yeah? Okay.
Nice.
I love the emphasis on mindfulness, on being present. And that sensual touch activity I was talking about a little bit is one of the cool things about it is that the whole premise of it is I've got nowhere better to be. I am just here. I'm not doing anything other than just exploring and enjoying your body with the different kinds of touch. It's so, just like luxuriating in the presence of your partner and the other person's feeling that too. Like it's, talk about connecting, like, and that's not strictly sexual either. Like that's more sensual than anything else. But so I love that note about mindfulness and being present. It's a big, and that could be more difficult or less difficult for different people. I think if you're someone who really struggles with anxiety, then talking to a therapist about your anxiety, learning ways to manage that can be a big key to enjoying your sex.
I mean, have you ever seen those little meme or the little gifs or little memes of someone's having sex and the other one's on the cell phone texting?
Yes, I've seen a lot of them.
That's like the opposite of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Being in the moment.
Yeah, it's insulting.
Yeah.
It's very disconnecting.
I was asking your boyfriend.
Yeah.
Can you quit it?
So
another thing that can affect arousal is diet.
that'd be really bad if it was a guy that texted that. No, it wouldn't
Would
be
it be
bad.
bad?
No, that's not what it meant.
Positivity.
It would really be an alternative.
He's like, I gotta take this
I
call.
better
Big ups.
I'm not.
Big ups to people of all
It's not
stars.
coming out the way he meant it to come out.
I'm sorry.
Big ups to people of all stars. All right. Things like cholesterol, sugar, or so actually, here's the thing. Does anybody here know how they invented Viagra?
It's a great story.
But
It's-
what's the
It was a drug being studied for a pulmonary, I forget exactly what it was, but it was a lung medication, and they kept finding all the men or coming back
For
with
heart,
a side
right?
effect.
Yeah.
Was it for lung or was it for heart?
I believe it's for the lungs
Oh.
because it helps
Okay.
with like bronchial dilations and
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you...
I got a bunch
the
of
side effects were
That's fine.
erections left and
Yeah,
right.
had nothing to do with direction.
Yeah,
It
I
had to
was
do
about
with
to
I
the-
still
Right.
can't breathe, but
Good,
Okay.
right, right.
Yeah.
I tell you
Oh,
something,
no, it works
doc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me tell you
Yeah,
a
'cause
side
when you
effect.
can't breathe, it's a bad thing.
Right. Okay. I thought it had to do with heart.
Close.
so,
Pretty close.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
It probably
another
does have
organ.
some
Yeah. Thank you. Make me feel good.
Yeah, in the same area.
But yeah, diet can definitely play a role. But how well is the blood moving in your body can be a big thing. And that's why you'll see. Well, okay. Another thing, medications, right? Blood thinners can be a big hamper to things like erections, but. And then also a lot of mental health or psychotropic medications can have effects on libido and ability to reach arousal. So, yeah, overall mental health, along the lines of what we're talking about, whether it's anxiety or depression, just a lot of things that get in the way. Overall physical health, things that we didn't mention, and then sometimes it can be overstimulation. Maybe someone's been masturbating too often, and when I say too often, again, being sex positive, what we're looking at is if it's happening so often that the sensitivity goes way down, then that's an issue for the partnership. Or maybe it's too much visual stimulation, watching too much pornography where it can run interference with your attraction to your partner. And again, these are things like masturbation and pornography. They're tough topics. I mean, we want to be positive and not shame people about it. At the same time, they can have effects. It's kind of difficult to navigate that sometimes. There's a lot of strong feelings about it, though, that can be difficult to navigate. And people, in where I grew up in the church, if you looked at porn at all, you had a porn addiction. That was I had to go to a 12-step. Seriously, because I was looking at porn a few times a week. Like,
Oh, good grief.
I wasn't skipping class. I wasn't like not showing up to work to look at. Yeah, it's a lot out there.
Just curious.
Yeah. So now all these things, yes, it can have to do with attraction at times. That is a factor, but the point I'm trying to make is there's just so many other factors that for that to be the first one you jump to, that I'm not attracted to my partner, it's not fair. It's not fair to yourself to jump to that. There are a lot of messages that say that it has to do with that, so I'm not going to say it's irrational, but it's just not fair to make that the most likely reason for it when there are so many other possible things going on. So let's talk a little bit about erectile dysfunction. So erectile dysfunction, it's when you're having trouble maintaining or reaching an erection. And make that so it can happen anytime. It's not always a chronic thing. It's just anytime if you're struggling with an erection, that's technically erectile dysfunction. But that doesn't mean it's something to seek help with, right? Like every man experiences this at times. There just again so many reasons it could happen. It's when it's happening consistently that it becomes maybe a diagnosis or something to really seek treatment about. So what you want to do first is rule out any kind of medical issues or hormones. That's always good to look into. Just make sure the equipment's working. See if there are any issues there. And then, so if it's a mental block, which it often is, best thing to do is find a way to allow it. Now, it sounds really difficult. So, what I mean, there are different things you could do, like losing an erection during a sexual experience can be an invitation to pivot to a different item on the sexual menu. If we go back to the menu, there are a lot of things on here that don't require an erection, right? You don't have to have an erection to perform oral sex on your partner, to manually stimulate them, to use a toy. So yeah, if it is persisting, it's just good to, and after you've ruled out medical things, or concurrently with ruling out medical things or hormones, seek help from a sex therapist or a coach about it. Just be good to get that help. Like me, like I don't know, I guess you could.
Here's my card.
Yeah, well, no problem. So, last thing I want to talk about is giving and receiving feedback. And this kind of goes back to that myth about sex being hard to talk about. Good communication can make great sex. That's one of the big keys to it. It's not everything, but it's a huge part of it. I define good communication as message sent equals message received. And that takes both sides to make that go well. It takes knowing how to phrase things in a productive way, and it takes questioning interpretations. I think that's a big part of what I work with people on. Like, what we're prone to do is hear something, our brain interprets what it means, why they're saying it, and we just run with it. But rather, if your partner is saying something that sounds insulting to you, hopefully that doesn't match up with their usual MO, right? Like, hopefully it's like, well, why would they say something insulting? That's a good invitation to question it. To, like, this is how it felt what you just said. Is that what you meant? A lot of time the answer's going to be, no, it's not what I meant. So, yeah, everyone's different. Every single person is different. The most experienced sexual partner out there doesn't know how your body works. Exactly how it works. So you got to talk about it. You can think of it as you're helping your partner make it more pleasurable by giving feedback. And that could be things like audible cues, like moans, things like just kind of expressing that kind of, I'm blanking on the word, but that pleasure. Verbal direction, about intensity, right? Like a little softer, a little harder, a little slower, right? Like different things like that. You can physically guide their hand to whatever they're doing, or their head. Like you can just kind of gently guide them. And I think so it could be gently, or it could be aggressively, depending on what you and your partner are into, right? Like, yeah. But that's why you got to make sure they're on board. If you're going to go the aggressive route, like no, come here. You got to make sure they're okay with that.
Not a first date thing.
Well, it could be.
Well,
You never know.
Could be. Absolutely could be.
Yeah, that's right. That's really good.
I didn't realize we were going to the dungeon.
Just have a waiver signed before.
Oh my goodness.
They have apps, I'm sure.
And then there's conversations between sexual experiences. So these were more like in the moment, but then there's in between times like, hey, there's that thing you did, I really liked it. Or there's that thing you did, I think it could be interesting if you do it this way.
Yeah.
So now there's receiving the feedback. It's assistance, not criticism. Now, this is the thing that breaks down a lot. When you're getting feedback, it's not because you're doing it wrong. That's not the way to look at it. It's just you could be doing it a little better, and you would be bringing them more pleasure. Isn't that what you want, right?
Yeah.
They're giving you. It's a gift to get that kind of feedback. That hey, if you do it this way, it'll feel even better to me. Well, that's what I want to do. Awesome.
Well, it's like if you're not communicating with your employees on improvement, how are they supposed to know?
Yeah.
How are they supposed to know if they can do better this way? This is the better way to do it. If you're not communicating, and it doesn't have to be like a Siri direction during sex, plug in Siri, turn right here, do this. But if you're not giving any kind of feedback and depending on the people, because some people like me are much more sensitive than others, I must have really messed up, But if you do it in a way, if you're sensitive to your partner and and understanding how they can interpret things, not the way you intended it, but I mean that's critical.
Yeah.
I mean, to be and again, it changes over the years.
It does.
When you're with your partner over the years,
constant
huge,
about
and you always got to be attuned to like the audible cues and different than the physical cues, because the physical guides may be very slight.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I didn't get that. I can tell you how many times she said to me on other cases too. It's like, well, what do I got to do? Hit you over the head with the hammer? I'm like, yeah, in this case you do, because I just missed the whole signal, right, altogether, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, it just,
Yeah.
especially if you're in the heat of the moment, it's really hard to get focused on it.
Yeah.
Listen to anything else.
You know, and that's another thing a lot of people miss is that you'll use subtle cues that you think are subtle cues,
Mm-hmm.
and the partner doesn't react to them. You can't judge them as subtle cues. You can judge them and take them to task if you specifically state something to them.
Right.
But if you're giving a subtle cue that you think was a cue that they didn't get, you got to give a little bit of grace when they don't get the cue that
Help
you
them
thought.
out.
Yeah.
Help them out. Like,
Yeah.
just help them connect the dots.
Yeah, exactly. So,
It's only going to benefit you to just make sure that the message is received.
Yeah, and it's not that they're not willing to adapt or please you or whatever. It
Right.
just wasn't received on whatever level you wanted it to be
Right.
received
Their
on.
mind reading skills were a little low that time.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't mention
I
mind
said,
reading.
I know I went to medical school, but the day they did mind reading, I was sick.
Yeah, there
See?
you go. There you go.
Yeah, I forgot to include mind reading on here as another way to do this.
I like that.
Sorry. But yeah, the goal is just to improve the experience, not tear anyone down. You're the expert on your own body. You're not an expert on anyone else's body. Even your intimate partner of decades, you're not an expert on their body. You have a lot of experience, but that's, like you were saying, like the bodies change. We all
Yep.
change. Like only the person actually feeling things is the expert on that stuff. Oh yeah, so something to keep in mind here is that sexual requests are vulnerable. So that can be the tricky thing. When you take it personally, it can really discourage people from giving that kind of feedback. If they try to help you, like, oh, this could actually feel a little better for me, and then you go, oh, well, yeah, I'm terrible at sex and I just can't do it. Like, you don't want to give that person feedback again, right?
Right.
And that's a difficult thing to do. It can be. It's a very vulnerable, maybe not difficult, but it's vulnerable to share what you like or don't like in sex. So you got to keep that in mind as person receiving feedback. They went out on a limb to tell you that. Like show some respect to that. Yeah. Okay. So that's sex. So, any questions about sex or about what I do as a sex therapist or anything?
You want to say something?
Well, I was going to say we have a lot of the same background. I grew up in a very, well, it was a cult. It's considered a cult now, but you know, my first husband was the first and worst experience I ever had. You know, and that just, and like you were saying, those verbal cues and how,
if that's all we'll do,
like, you know, if you're told something early on for years and years and years, and you know, it just follows you on through. It's taken a long time to get through that, but yeah, I ended up the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun to break out of that.
Yeah, it's
Difficult at
really
first,
interesting. Not always easy, but it is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like vulnerability, like there's times when like, especially when you've been together for so long, you're like, well, why are you afraid to share that? Because it's not like I'm going anywhere.
Right.
And it's like, I'm really into this, so whatever you want to share, I'm gung-ho with pretty much anything you want to do or try or experience or whatever. So don't be afraid to say, I like this, I don't like that, I did it, whatever. I mean...
But that's a good question, and not rhetorically sometimes too, right? Like, why it seems like you're hesitant to share this with me. Like, what can you tell me? Like, what that's about? Like, what? Just kind of explore that.
I mean, a lot of times it's from past experiences that they were afraid because they've been made fun of or like, you know, put down for whatever. And I'm like, it's hard to overcome some things from way back when. I mean, a lot of times I have insecurity about a lot of things, and not necessarily, but just in general. So that impacts my insecurity well, that wasn't the greatest, or oh, I must have done something wrong. And it's more on my own insecurity
Yeah.
in general than it has to do with sex in particular or whatever it is.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, any other questions for now? Or?